Thank you for having me here. It's a real privilege to speak in front of you, and I hope I can provide some added value for your work by giving an insight into Google and how we work, especially under that 9 to 5. We're talking a lot about future of employment, and I understand most of you are in HR or decision makers running their own companies. So what I present to you is not meant to say, look, this is the best or this is the only, or copy us, but I hope I'm able to give you some ideas that you may think, well, maybe that could work in my company, or haven't thought about this. So if that is an outcome, I consider that to be a success. I think in this room we have everything from the digital alien potentially to the digital native, not yet, but some of us certainly have that digital native at home. These are these little creatures who take your smartphone and are faster in sort of revamping the pictures and everything else than you could even think about it. And you don't know how to sort of reverse it, right? I have two of those daughters, and they're already taken over my ownership of the new devices. Now, we meet these generations in our workplace, right? And obviously for digital aliens, the explorers, there's more change than for the digital natives. And I just had a chance to give an interview, and we strived on that topic, Gen Y. And I would say, don't be afraid of Gen Y. That Gen Y expression is oversimplified, if you ask me. We quite often refer to them at the top 20%, those who have studied in 3 countries at 4 universities. People who were so highly qualified did always find a job. And yes, they come into our companies and they change the way we think, but do use them as what they are, as catalysts, as someone who brings in new ideas. They will develop, they will bring your culture forward, but no fear. And certainly they're a part of the workforce, but they should never be singled out or the only one or the cream. Trust them, because they know sort of the new technologies, and whatever you do in the online space, maybe you give them the last 5% of your budget in whatever you do and say, well, what would you do with this? And maybe they provide some new ideas. What has changed for all of us in this room, and sometimes if I speak to colleagues from other companies, maybe we haven't fully anticipated the full power and the tremendous change that we experience, is the connectivity. We're networked more than ever, and in many facets we don't imagine. And just to highlight, from a technological point of view, we're talking today about access and availability that matters. So, if you're a company, I know that when I worked with my previous company, I was given a BlackBerry, and I was sort of given it as still sort of a privilege. It was part of that hierarchy level I was in. Don't do that anymore, because you won't get the people that you will need. A smartphone is just a smartphone. It should be a tool. And I believe strongly in that everyone in your company needs that tool to sort of work in that world of connectivity. And obviously also availability matters, right? If you have people working from home, make it accessible to them as well. Now, economically speaking, efficiency matters. And if you have not read it or haven't heard about it, I think the most inspiring book on this is still Tom Friedman, The World is Flat. It gives you striking examples on how the network and internet and digitalization has changed everything. Our market is global. We in Google, we have a couple of very small companies that were to sort of produce traditional clothing in Scotland, and all of a sudden, through the internet, that Scottish, that was a family-run shop, has purchases in the millions, because everyone who ever immigrated from Scotland to Canada and Australia, so now is able to buy that, where in 10 years before they would have just been able to buy it when they passed by the shop, the local store in Edinburgh. All of us can be authors, entrepreneurs. It's massive, and I still see sometimes people say, yeah, we have this digital department within our company. I think if you do this, you come short of the idea of the internet. The internet is like the telephone line in your office. It's everywhere. And everyone in your company needs to think digital. What does it mean for you if you recruit? What does it mean if you need suppliers? What does it mean if you need to conquer a new market, if you enter into competition? I got my job, and it's not a fairy tale, it's a true story. When I sort of was 3 years in Australia, we decided to go home. And I said, well, how on earth do I ever get a job in Hamburg? And my wife said, well, did you try? Did you Google it? I started Googling jobs in Hamburg, and 6 weeks later, the job came up that I'm in today. I did not consider this possible. And I had 8 interviews at the time, and I did not meet a single person I would work with. I thought it takes a real handshake in real life and a face-to-face conversation. I had 8 interviews via video conferencing and telephones. I was in 2 offices where I would take those video conferences from, so I would meet some Googlers, but none of them were part of the recruitment process. It's doable. And if you don't do it, your competition does it. Socially, the net means dialogue on belonging matters. So many of us in companies struggle to say, well, is he or she allowed to go on LinkedIn while working? Well, it's part of everyday life, and I hope you also rely on referrals. So, I wouldn't say encourage it in every minute of the day that people go in their networks, but we realize that they are. And so surely they can also go online and tweet and go on LinkedIn and whatever else throughout the day, because in times of the internet, the place and time of work becomes superfluous. For many of us who are knowledge workers, but for more and more people. And I'm absolutely confident if we talk about Internet 4.0 and machines being sort of steered by via the internet with gadgets, then we will also see more and more production workers not requiring to stay at the plant site all the time at least. It'll come, and so anticipate that change. Work with it, allow this. I believe that we human beings have always been social animals that want to connect and want to share. And if you look at the business models of these days, especially coming out of California, there's a huge idea behind sharing. Airbnb, the car sharing. You don't own anything in these days, right? So culturally, it's about transparency and collaboration that matters. And if you're a company where your employee would learn more about your company than you ever entrusted your employee yourself, you do something terribly wrong. And I will give you some examples on how we live that transparency. So this essentially is Google. And I know maybe not in Finland, because we run a data center here, which is now being enlarged. This is great news for you. It's great news for us. The general perception of Google is they're a media company. They have this internet monopoly. Well, our self-perception is we are sort of a high-technology company. And I guess you can say we're a child of the internet. So these 7 areas here I highlighted are sort of the areas where sort of everyone is a direct, who heads one of those, is a direct report of Larry Page, our CEO. Is very much sort of a board of technology owners plus CFO, COO, but that's it. So our self-perception is we're a high-technology company, and I will show you what impact that has moving forward. So because of that, because of the speed of the internet, Eric Schmidt was our CEO, is now still sort of board member, said, innovation is at the heart of our business. And the story of innovation has not changed. It has always been a small team of people who have a new idea, typically not understood by people around them. And I highlighted those 3 white dots there, and my last chart will sort of show or amend that phrase that is missing. Now, he said it, and also that means that knowledge-based workers in a fast-paced environment need creativity. They need the ability to collaborate. There it is again, being networked, being able to exchange. They need the ability to learn quickly and the ability to solve problems. This all needs to come from within the employee, right? So quite logically, our founders, when having the initial public offering in 2004, said, we also emphasized an atmosphere of creativity, of challenge. Our employees are everything. We will reward and treat them well. So we are a very much employee-centered company. And that's not a surprise, because these 2 founders came from Stanford. sort of organizing the internet and the world's information was at the beginning more or less an academic problem that needed to be solved, and all of a sudden they saw the huge potential financially. And the first 20 Googlers were basically student colleagues, fellow students from Stanford. That makes things easier for us. We do not have a 100-year-old tradition out of the industrial age over and over again. But again, it also means that it is not an excuse to say, well, only Google can do that. We have a different starting point, but in the end of the day, these days, we're all in this together, and we have challenges that might differ from yours, and I'm happy to talk about these later on. But this is the starting point, and my biggest advantage as an HR business partner, I have the founders believing sort of at the bottom of their heart, at the core, in the people in the business. I don't need to convince them to invest in people. And at that time, people were all we had, right? The brand wasn't well known. We didn't have a lot of capital. We don't have a history. We don't have a trademark. And competition there is really rough. Every other day, you might have a new competitor, and every other day, one competitor is gone. So with that tailwind, we had this change, but as I said to you, this change, I think, is for all of us. Maybe even feelable. Hands up, who experienced change these times? Huge change. Yeah, thank you. Because I think also in developed countries, such as Finland, potentially, we feel like, can we still be more efficient or streamlined? Or yes, potentially a little bit. But that's exactly why sort of my boss, CEO Larry Page, says it's not about 10%, it's 10x. We come at our limits of driving efficiency. We need to do something fundamentally different or new. So I try to embrace that idea. So where do we steer people, right? They look at their leaders. They look at us. And in a world that is ever more complex, I think we're no longer in a position to tell them the know-how, but essentially only the know-why. What does it mean? Where's the difference? Well, leaders used to say, this is the direction, this is what we follow. And either they knew or they followed their intuition. Now, I'm saying that probably worked in the past, but with the ever higher frequency of change and the ever more complex world around us, that intuition may lead you in the wrong direction. And if you're a leader today, and if you're in HR, I think you need to recognize that the net and the horizontal exchange of ideas is essential. And ideally, you can spot trends or directions. And all of a sudden, because of that, you feel also where in the organization is someone who's sort of a thought leader, who has a brilliant idea you have never heard of, and you would have never heard of if the net wasn't there and you have an open forum to discuss it or invite everyone to contribute to. Now, the moment you do this, there comes a time where you need to collect all those ideas, and then there comes a point where you or the leaders again need to sort of go up that hierarchy and say, out of those 4 or 5 scenarios we're discussing, I'm now taking a decision. And then you need to explain why you take that scenario and not the 4 others, and then you need to do such a good job that everyone who was favoring another scenario still follows the one you choose. That's why I'm saying it's not about know-how, it's about know-why these days. And it will require a very different level of leadership. So what I thought I could sort of give you to take away, and I hope you can recall it tomorrow, is sort of a 3x3 formula. These days, I think more and more people who are knowledge-based want purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Right? We want to all do something more than just doing a job where we get some money. We want some recognition. We want something that we said we were proud of or changed. We want to be treated as adults. We want to do this in our own autonomy. I guess we have a fair idea on how we want to achieve things. We may ask for help, but we don't want to be told, like in classical times of Taylorism. And I fundamentally believe everyone wants to do whatever he or she does good, so that level of mastery, not just doing it for the sake of it being done, but being recognized for that as well. So you potentially look for a company that has a mission where you can fulfill your purpose, or that allows for that. You look for a company that treats you as an adult in terms of your autonomy and being transparent and leaving you choices. And you look for a company that hears you, so voice and engagement and wants more from you if you are willing to offer that than just you in an office, but your brain, your passion, your commitment. So that means as an HR person, you step aside and say, how do I create a triangle as big as possible that says, we're looking for capable people, and once we have capable people, we take for granted that they are motivated. So, they want to do, and we will come in a minute on what that means for us. And now it's up on us to enable them to do what they want to do in the company we're in. How does it look like? Able to do starts with capabilities, and that is recruitment. And because this is not a presentation on recruitment, I'll just give you sort of the one-shot philosophy of what is our still most important process in Google, that is recruitment. You determine who gets on the bus, solves literally all problems. You get the wrong people in the bus, you can rework, but there are attitudes and behaviors, and because you recruit at least age-wise adults, it'll be very hard sort of to have change from people that maybe don't want to change unless you aim to manipulate, which is obviously wrong. So the saying in Google is an A interviewer recruit A employees, a B interviewer recruit C employees. What does it mean? For Googlers, it's a privilege to recruit and to be an interviewer. And we interview in panels, meaning that on average we have 4 interviews. And if I were a hiring manager for HR, it would be probably me interviewing. It might be an HR colleague in London, and it might be someone from finance. We would also be very adamant that it is a woman and a man in that panel to be balanced gender-wise, maybe age-wise. If I recruit someone for Nordics working for me, then obviously I also want that person to be diverse in terms of do they recognize the differences, all those facets. Now, if you choose second best interviewers, you get third best candidates, because the B interviewer will always look for someone who's still smaller than themselves. Whereas we try to live a culture where you as an interviewer are recognized for bringing in people that are potentially even greater and smarter than you yourself. And if you have that mindset, and if people don't have fear that if they recruit great people that they lose their job, but that in fact they're recognized up to a level of trusted interviewer, that is hand on shoulders. Because Larry Page still looks at huge Excel files essentially every week. He probably doesn't look at every name, but it's still true that he asks for those lists, and maybe he just screens it and looks for someone who's named James or worked in Stanford, or he just wants to know what engineer we are requiring in Finland, and he could say, well, who is this and why do we recruit him? So the relevance of recruitment is also reflected by the fact that the CEO every week looks at least at the list. I don't know whether he physically looks at it, but he has it on his desk. He can either say, go ahead, or he goes, well, let me spend 5 minutes and pick 2 or 3 names. That relevance ensures that we recruit really good people. And if you don't give this process the relevance, you know the outcome. Second in that triangle is, motivated people. Now, I hear quite often colleagues saying, how do we motivate our workforce? Well, in Google, we think, don't motivate them. Do everything to avoid that they get demotivated, because they are already motivated. They want to work for you. They have one life to live. Why would they come to you if they, based on their skill set, could come to others? And if we look at the demographics, I don't know for Finland, but in Germany, it's a big topic to say, well, how do we get enough people in our workforce essentially as of now? So what if you were to sort of consider people being motivated, and it is your and the leader's task to remove every obstacle that comes in between? And so we believe in the mission, identification, and respect that you as a company need to offer to someone who is already motivated. Now, our mission was in the first days to sort of organize the world's information and make them accessible and universally useful. These days, we would probably say something like, do cool things that matter. And if you look at it, sort of this is Google Art up there. This is actually, we wouldn't call it 20% project anymore, but it was an idea of a Googler who was a fanatic in artists, and he said, what if we would capture the world's information on art? And we started to go into museums. Some were quite skeptical, but some said, yeah, go ahead. And for every museum we put up there, the museums thanked us because they said, we got 20% more visitors. People who looked at the paintings online were even more keen to come to the museum. And people who weren't, because of age or poverty or disability, at least felt like, wow, I have access to art I didn't have before. That's inspiring, even if you're not an engineer, and if I never worked even with one of those guys who works on that project, but this gives me a purpose for being in Google. Right to the next is the first blind driver in one of those Google cars that cruise around California. Again, very bold, very visionary. No one ever thought that an internet company would move in that territory. But if you look at it, it's about processing information to get this car with this person from spot A to B. At the bottom left, that is a balloon, and this balloon goes in the stratosphere and then circles across Africa to bring internet to Africa. And obviously Google Glass you have heard about. So that is what's appealing to engineers and far beyond, for instance, for our sales force. They know that we need high revenue to be able to invest in these ideas because these are the successful ideas. We all, including me, don't know of the ones who failed, maybe quite early or at mid-stage. If you want to give identification, it starts already with your office. So, is your reception desk your first point of control, or is it something like homecoming? If I go to a Google office, nearly no matter where, I already know I'm in a Google office. And even when I worked with a previous company that did that equally well, they said, if ever you sort of go hiking in Vietnam or Peru, take the address. Because if anything happens, we can surely better and faster help you than any embassy in the world. So if you're a global player, would your employees feel like homecoming? Would they recognize your office no matter where you are? Creates a strong sense of belonging. My American friends would say, yeah, we are family. I struggle a little bit with that concept. Because in a family, I'm not evaluated, I'm not elected, I'm not recruited. So I wouldn't say family, but I would say maybe tribe. There's a set of acronyms, there's a set of language, there's an equally strong sense of belonging. And just to give you some sort of impressions, this shall not be a show of architecture, but I want to show you sort of where the spirit comes from, that physical work environment that then sort of reflects also on the psychological work environment. You see the Android lamps there hanging from the ceiling. For some, it might be a waste of money, and I'm sure that not everyone can afford it. But again, here we try to say, you don't need to come in this office. You could work from home. So if I refer back to the tribal metaphor, we want you still to come to the office because this is where the tribe meets. So ordinary or identity, is that a conference room or a creativity space? As we grow older, we have habits, we have attitudes, we have experiences, and it's our job in Google, and it is yours in your company, to break those, to have people permanently thinking out of a box. And one of the ways we do this is creating rooms and make them look differently. This one here is a beautiful room in Israel. So is it a desert or an oasis to free up your mind? And then I always dislike sort of those reports where it says $5 billion are lost because people smoke in a corner. Now, smoking is one thing, but if people there met in the corner, and now let's assume it's not a cigarette, but it's a coffee, then for us, the coffee is an investment. And quite frankly speaking, if you've ever been in the Silicon Valley, you know that it is in the middle of nowhere between San Francisco and San Jose. So if engineers in our headquarters wanted to have a coffee, and there were none, they had to drive 15 miles in one direction or the other, and they were gone from the campus, and they probably said, might as well go home. So that's why we brought every sort of thing that made life easier on the ground. So you could get your hair cut, you could bring your shirts to the washing, etc., etc., etc. We had most recently in Hamburg, we asked sort of a bicycle repair to stop in the front door and have every cycle repaired. The problem was the ones who were with a cycle in the office, the cycle obviously didn't need a repair. So some said, can I go home and bring my broken bike? if this coffee, and again, this was very much engineer-driven, they said, you see a lot of barista machines, it meant to be good. It's an investment. It's the respect to the person. It's okay for you to have a coffee, and by the way, we want you to have a good one. It's not a waste of time. And be happy that you get some hot water that looks like coffee. Again, this is Israel. Still need to go there, need to find a reason. Is that a leisure zone or an innovation lab? You see two guys talking there. As Eric Schmidt said in the beginning, it's all about conversations. I don't know how many inventors you find that have an idea and sort of created that invention completely on their own. I don't know. I don't have any stats. But I think it's fair to say that by far the most innovations happens by a couple of people who bouncing off ideas, who evolve them and try out. So we want people to meet. And we have sort of open space where 20 people work together roughly, not more than that. I have now my single office, but that's only because half of my day, if not 2/3, exists out of meetings. And if I were always to have to find a meeting room, I would probably go very much berserk. So I'm in my own office, which can be used by everyone if I'm not around. But likewise do I try to be every day at least 2 or 3 different floors. And obviously it helps if floors look like that. So you get around, you get to see people. Which is not always easy. If you think of you always go to level 2 and someone else go to level 4, you may never see that someone. We try to have people mingling. We're talking about transparency now. Communication is key. And TGIF, who has heard about that acronym? Thank you. TGIF has become TGIT. TGIF, for those who don't know, is Thank God It's Friday. And on every Friday, the guys in California sat together and discussed what happened the week, and quite often it could be on coding, and as the company grew, it was more sort of on different subjects, and the guys were now so kind to move it to Thursday, because if it's Thursday night, it can be recorded and still be watched in Asia and Europe on a Friday. In previous times, we were always only to look sort of the Streamline event on a Monday. Here you see the member of boards. The second from the far right, for instance, the CFO. And there's Larry standing with his microphone, and in front of him are all Googlers. Now, the English language already makes it easier to simply say you, right? I don't know how you do it in Finland. In Germany, you would choose a more polite form if you ever were to talk to your CEO. Here it's just the you, and it also helps that it's in California, it's engineers, so they all wear jeans. They look like the workforce. So that creates sort of meeting at eyesight. And Larry will answer every question no matter what. He's present, and he knows how important it is for him to be there and for people to ask questions. And if they're not present there, they can ask via email. What helps us is it doesn't necessarily matter where you're in the hierarchy, it's the quality of your argument. And so in Google, we don't like to say, I believe, or I say so, but we say, data says. And if you think about it, if you're able to, in your company to create sort of an environment where the best argument counts and the facts, you also take away that hierarchy level and, oh, only the big shots up there know what's best for us. We in a technology company, and those of you working with engineers know that this is very easy because this is what engineers are very fact-based. Marketeer or HR may not always be the case. But you need to argue. So I'm very much trained also in the previous company to argue in terms of business cases. And also in Google, every HR thing we do or don't do is ideally proven by stats, or if it's not a stat, we run a pilot to say what sort of the data shows us. Look at how your decision-making is made and whether someone says, I say so, or I think, or whether it is based on core criteria. So now we come to people being enabled. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I quite often see is that we ask people to do something, but they're not empowered to do so, right? We don't delegate that piece with it. So coming to voice and engagement, and I only realized this morning that yeah, you probably know the guy in the top right. He's working in the Hamburg office, Petri Koko, that is. And I chose him because he looked so happy in his Finnish outfit there, and that was on a diversity day we celebrated. So Petri seems to be everywhere, even if he's not here. Give people the freedom, and you'll be amazed. there's always a sense of control, of distrust. Do they really work? If they're not in office, do people work? You can't. The question would be, do you think they work because they're in office? And as I said at the beginning, we live in a culture where I try to keep my business running in Germany today, at the airport or when getting up at the hotel. And tomorrow I might come home early because my daughter wants to go swimming, and then I take her swimming, and I might have to finish my job at 8. Many of us probably already do this. Many more people in the workforce will do this going forward. So let's face that reality and allow this. I'm so amazed by, and I think this is very, very true, what's written on here, because this morning when I spoke with my Finnish team, I said, I heard that you have some kind of project plan now that it becomes sort of winter. Tell me more about it. And they said, oh, yeah, we thought about sort of dark time. We will have Kill the Darkness week next week. I said, oh, well, what does that mean? Tell me more about it. He said, well, we gathered in the office, 22, 23 people, I think. And so we will start off next Monday with playing beach volleyball from 9 to 12. We bring summer back. And on Wednesday, we will have over lunch a 1-hour lecture on mindfulness. Maybe we link it with yoga. And before we have our Christmas party, and I said, Christmas party? And they said, yeah, we have Christmas parties in November in Finland. I hope that's true. We will actually bring someone in who does sort of a facial and beauty massage. And I said, well, are you nearly all guys? He said, well, that's because. So I thought, wow, this is stunning. Take many, many pictures. Tell me all about it. I think this could be sort of a Finnish initiative going way beyond Finland within Google that we could call Kill the Darkness. And maybe it's just not the light. It's maybe being dull, being sort of conventional. I love that phrase. I didn't tell them to do that. They did. We just gave them freedom to think about it. And they probably have also asked, well, is there some budget, or how can we make this happen? And surely we found some euro. And I'm saying some because one of our core values in Google is being scrappy. So yes, we are a rich company, but still there is scrappiness all around. We usually fly economy and not first class. And for these, sometimes it's actually crazy, because if they were to ask, Frank, do you have 500 euro? I would say, I don't even have my own cost center. We have a global HR cost center, so no, I don't have the 500, but let me see how we can get this over the line. The freedom sometimes is very stressful, because we try to live with less rules. And in a complex world, sometimes you really like rules, right? It's comfortable. Someone else said what's okay, what's not okay. In our company, we try to take the freedom to say, oh, for this challenge, we don't have a rule. There's no yes, no. So what would you do? And again, we come back to taking you serious, treating you like an adult. We push decisions back to you, and that's sometimes very difficult. Some people, really struggle to take that decisions. I was speaking with sort of a German car manufacturer who ultimately asked for all servers to be turned off over the weekend, because the Works Council said it's so stressful and never ever does one stop writing emails. I said, well, do you think that the someone who always writes a lot of emails, or who feels like Monday at 9 o'clock you should have that email, will not write it over the weekend, and once the server is on, it goes bam, 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 and you have 20 in your inbox? Why do you try to control technology, which is meant to be an enabler, and not rather educate your staff, which is no doubt harder, and agree on what is acceptable? We try to do it the harder way, sometimes very painful, definitely can be stressful, and not always right. Some things we get wrong, but we aim to resist as many rules as possible, because the rule very much becomes a corset, and you never get out of it. And the situation you created that rule for might have changed completely within 6 months, but you still have that rule, and people who clinch on it and refer to it, and it doesn't reflect reality anymore. So it's not easy, but I think it's the right thing to do. Leading others in Google is a real privilege, and this is not just fluffy talk. We have a 360-degree assessment, which we call Upward Feedback Survey, and we have employee survey annually, where also people are invited to sort of pass their opinion on their direct leader, but also on their vice president and so forth. So when I talk with people managers who get those surveys back, and some are frustrated or don't understand it, I always say, well, I don't look at the numbers, I look at the context. So no fear for the survey, and the survey has no impact directly on your pay or whatever else. However, if you have over 2 or 3 years' time, poor results, maybe you are not the one who should lead people if they tell you that you don't adhere to one-on-ones. Be an adult, take the decision. We're not going to kick you out of the office, but maybe you're in a position where you can't be most successful in. And so, as I said in the beginning, with the steer wheel, leadership comes within Google, not by the number of people. We are not that many. It doesn't come by owning a P&L, because we're business units, we hardly have any P&L. The people come to us for the impact they have on the economy and for the freedom, and leaders sort of really need to serve their people. And quite often, actually, people look at leaders, and I hear quite often, I would want to work for him or for her. And that's not because they're nice people. It's not the one who wants to be loved most. In fact, those are the ones that, hey, this could be a nice guy, but I don't want to work for him. He's just nice. He's not honest. He doesn't deal with uncomfortable truth. He doesn't tell me where I really am and how I'm really perceived. And along with that goes that not only your leader has ideas or only engineering, but that we say everyone has ideas. It's not a matter of the R&D department. Example, what do we in HR? We had one sort of thinking or idea that it took us way too long in India to recruit. So we said, what if we would be able to recruit in 1 day? Never done that before. Quite a challenge. And they put it all up, and they basically interviewed and in parallel already assessed, and whilst the candidates were eating, they were sort of calibrating and having the committee, and whilst they were having the coffee, they were issuing the contracts, and at 5 o'clock they said, here's the contract. It took a combined effort, but it could be done, and someone was bold enough to think that way. And if you work in payroll, and you have another, 500 payslips to do, and you would say, well, would I recruit someone who can do 500 or 550? Maybe you consider recruiting someone who hates doing that and would say, what is this process? Why does it have 20 interfaces? I'm really unhappy with this job. I want to cut it down to 5 interfaces. And it changes the whole way you look at payroll. We had someone in the legal department who thought that way and said, why do we have to courier always wet signatures throughout Europe? It's a very clumsy process. Our contracts get established and issued in Dublin, and we need to send them essentially all over EMEA. It didn't work for all of EMEA, but we found quite a few countries where wet signature was not sort of a must-have, and where the process was redesigned and really efficient. So I trust that there's huge potential within whatever department you work where you could do things different or think about it. And then we do take those ideas, and what we say is we use greenhousing. Let them rise. Don't kill them. I was telling people in the break that, at least in Germany, there's a tendency to say yes, but. You have an idea, and someone says, yeah, yes, but. That can even be explained by sort of our cultural heritage. I guess we were so often in battle with the French and the Russians, and we're such a high-density population that we always look for the compromise before we look for a solution, because we don't want to tap on anyone's toes. If you work with a Canadian, American, Australian company, it's very likely that you have a yes and pioneer mentality. Let's go for it. Sometimes, I think in Europe, we don't like this because the US seems so bold and maybe like so lack of sensibility. But at least in idea generation, it does help, because someone is building on the idea. And the moment you do this, even if what is at the end was not what you thought, you feel appreciated, your opinion is valued, and there's some outcome. And maybe it becomes one of those many salads, and you still need to chop it off because at one point in time there is just too much resource required, or your company requires a different focus. But we create an atmosphere where everyone sort of is encouraged to think about the world and how to make things different. And that, again, builds to what we said, more and more people potentially looking, which is purpose, right? This is an example of a peer-to-peer reward. We have hierarchies, we need leaders, but we shall allow horizontal connections and appreciation wherever possible. So you could, I've done that similarly without financial rewards in another company, and I give you that example too. So here, Eva just organized a blood donation, and in this case I thanked her, and I just initiated via email a peer award. And the peer award in Google is 100. It's $100, it's £100, it's €100. It's probably not 100 renminbi. I don't know the number for China. Don't ask me. But what I do is I say, Eva, great done, super job. It goes to the line manager, who could reject. I have never seen that in 3 years happening. They rather say, wow, I didn't even know she did this. Awesome. I get another data point of feedback of what my staff does. Excellent. And the only time where it gets critical if you have 5 people organizing a Christmas party and 50 people giving a peer bonus. That's where we go, well, let's not overdo it, then we give a spot bonus for the company instead. That framework that we operate has very few rules. In essence, if I give you one, you can't give me one back for 6 months, so it's not a second income. And it's essentially limited by sort of giving 5 per quarter, but if you give 6, 7, 8, you basically get sort of a, are you sure you still want to keep giving? It's not a no-go. Right? Rightly so. Again, you are an adult. You know when you want to reward someone. It's very widely used. And what it does is sort of it celebrates amongst us. It doesn't take a leader who needs to spot it. It is highly regarded. I see people printing it out, putting it on the page. Those who don't print it out still talk about it. And if we have talent reviews, and you have the leaders talking about talent, then I can look in an HR system and say, well, we talk about Jack and Jill. Jack had 2 peer bonus, Jill had 25. Did you know this? Oh. So, you could argue, is that manipulated? But trust these people. We probably know that Jill got 25 because she's known for doing great stuff, for being very supportive and collaborative anyway. That works very well, and in my previous companies, we didn't use it for monetary reward. We simply invited all employees to take pictures of our company values in a competition. We selected the 8 best pictures to represent collaboration, quality, and whatever else. We printed them on postcards, and we just put the postcards in the hallways. And for some time, and I'm very German, I guess, in that aspect, I thought, that looks a bit like Employee of the Month. I don't know whether that flies. I mean, we have people who studied, why should they like a postcard? Wrong thinking. When I got my first postcard from the CMO, I was over the moon. I said, wow, she sees what I do, she recognizes it, I like it. And I trust you will do too. So that became a currency amongst employees, and it built in this credit bank of trust. And I'm sure you might have some ideas, if you don't have it already in your company, which will work and shows that. We work a lot with advisors and mentors in the company. We're fast-paced, we're highly complex, so we don't rely on just the hiring manager or HR. In fact, we say, you get a hiring manager, you get a buddy, and if your hiring manager is not at the same location you work, you get a second buddy, that one is on the ground and one is in your organization, to really ensure your onboarding goes well. And a lot of people who are advisors and mentors already appreciate being that. Because if you take that to the next level, we have a program called G2G, which is Googler to Googler. And that's our way to embrace and to foster a learning culture. We fundamentally believe that everyone has something to teach. And it comes back to my notion of, I believe that human beings are there for sharing. They want to share. And they want to claim mastery in what they do. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be on coding. I have G2G Googlers who teach others on tango dancing or jiu-jitsu, or, the sky's the limit in your imagination. If no one wants to dance tango, well, then no class will take place, but not because I don't want, but because there's no demand, right? And if that person says, well, I'm not yet confident to present on stage what I want to present, we give them a presentation training. And we do this times all over again, and people who never thought that they were to do anything else but their job feel like, hey, I have something great to give. I could teach others, and it's a give and take. And again, you work with this recognition and someone being work as you live, bring your whole self to work. Works tremendously well. A lot of people are very proud to be a G2G Googler. We have rising numbers in participants as much as trainings given. A lot of talk is about diversity and inclusion. And I recently spoke with the HR director for McDonald's in Germany. I said, wow, you have 140 nations working. You sure are diverse. I said, we in Germany are probably not that diverse, but what we celebrate once a year in Google is actually our diversity TGIF. And just a fortnight ago, it was our third occasion. It's organized by employees, for employees. This picture is from last year, where we basically ask everyone to come as they are. And in this case, you know, as you can see, a Scotsman and someone from Afghanistan. And we celebrated our diversity. Do you do this? Do you do this enough? And that doesn't limit us to gender, or in this case to ethnicity. We also discuss a lot of different sort of social backgrounds. Where do people come from? What do we need to embrace more? We're very much a performance-driven company, and we now sort of also try to convince a lot of business about the value of branding online, because it becomes sort of the shop window of the world. But then we need different people who think in branding, who understand your brand rather than your keyword. So that's a different mindset. And so we see that now that there's a new part of our workforce coming into the organization that is very different from the existing one. So there's a diversity in ways of thinking that we currently sort of try to foster and nurture and sort of mix with one another. And engagement. We want and we allow Googlers to contribute and to give back. These people are highly skilled, highly ambitious. They're privileged in many ways. So yes, they should give back. We have a Google matching scheme, which I like because it says, you do too, not just ask the company to spend $1 million, but if Googlers spend $1 million, then Google will put $1 million on top of it. We have one program where you basically get a travel budget, and if you stay below the travel budget because you do wise travel budget planning, you get travel credits. You can either spend them on the next trip if you needed to plan it very short term, and you can spend them there. And once a year, you can donate sort of the amount that you saved on travel. Just yesterday, there was the call to action for the Philippines. And in this picture was taken when sort of the digital natives told the digital dinosaurs, I suppose, how to go online. Fantastic how that interacted. And in this context, looking at this lady, we also had the idea of bring your parents to work day. I don't know whether you've done this. If you haven't, bring your kids is quite often the case. If you have a plant, when I worked in a plant, we opened it up for everyone, but in a work environment, in an office environment, it was new to me, and we had 80 parents coming, who always knew that the guys and the girls worked for Google, but didn't really know what Google was all about. Excellent meeting. Really, you could see the smiling faces. It felt like some really understood for the first time what their children are actually doing. So with this, I conclude that the missing sentence here is you have to have the culture and you have to get it right. And as I said in the beginning, yes, we, in many ways, because we're young, because we don't have a 100-year history, and because we have founders that put this at the very foundation of our business, we have a lot of leeway, but this is a huge fishbowl, and I would very welcome to see many more of you and us in this same bowl, because it's just a great place to be, and I think this is what we own all of our employees. Thank you.
10.